Okay, we're mad scientists. What do you expect?
Larry, put in Humanoid Women.
This time, we watched KTMA Episode 11, Humanoid Woman.
In which a robot taffy pull saves the universe.
But first, some follow-up, but not follow-up. We've got news. We've got exciting news that some of you may know about depending on how we've done our social media rollout. But, Charlotte, do you enjoy being alive?
I do enjoy being alive. It sure beats the alternative, Chris.
And do you enjoy being alive with other people?
Wow, is there any other way to be alive?
Yeah, just, it's been a long pandemic, okay?
I suppose that's true.
But we are heading out of quarantine, and we're going to have our very first live show. In fact, there's going to be a whole bunch of them because a bunch of the megaphonic podcasts are coming together for an evening of conversations and a game show on Saturday, April 22nd. In Portland, Oregon.
Isn't that Earth Day, too? So much to celebrate.
Well, we will save the planet by talking in front of people.
Ooh, I'm so good at that.
It's gonna be a lot of fun, I think. It's gonna be our sister podcast, By the Bywater's 50th episode, and that's very exciting.
I can't believe that. They've already done 50 episodes?
I know. I mean, we've done 130, but...
Also hard to believe. It's amazing.
Yeah, I suppose so. Anywho, so we're going to be opening for them in a sense, but y'all, if you're in the Portland area, come on by. There'll be details in the show notes. Let us know. Drop us a line if you're going to come too. Why not? It'll be fun. It'll be a nice time. I don't know. And and also we're going to have my game show podcast.
Game show 1939?
Exactly. We're going to see how people do with trivia questions written in the 1930s.
I mean, given how well I do on trivia questions for you on this show, hopefully everybody does better than me.
Well, we'll see if you're going to be one of the contestants or not. You'll have to show up to find out or wait for the recordings to be released. But yes, that is happening soon.
I think that's going to be like a lot of fun just to have all of the megaphonic hosts. Well, not all of them, but some of the megaphonic hosts all coming together. There's so many of them that I've never met in person, and it's going to be a real treat to be able to do so.
Yeah, there's a few that I haven't even met in person. So I'm super excited about that. It'll be a lot of fun. And I'm not expecting it to necessarily be a huge thing, but I am expecting it to be a fun thing. So if you're in the neighborhood and you want to come join us, please do. Mark it on your calendars and, celebrate Earth Day by flying out to Portland like we will be to participate in this first ever live episode of It's Just a Show.
And I assume the first ever By the Bywater and the first ever game show 1939?
Yeah, exactly. But I imagine most of our listeners care more about our show. But maybe not. I don't know.
I mean,
it's not unreasonable to care about the other shows more.
Absolutely. And this is not a competition. Everybody come see us.
Not everybody. If everybody came and saw us, we wouldn't have enough capacity. Well, I'm not expecting that many of our listeners to be able to make it out to Portland. But for those of you who can, we'd love to see you.
Absolutely.
All right. Otherwise, I haven't finished editing the last episode as we're recording this, so I don't have any feedback from our highly contentious episode on Space Mutiny. That'll come around next time.
Although our Discord is still talking about pickles, so really, we don't have to update everything. Sorry, Jess. Pickle.
Okay, well, let's talk about this curious KTMA episode, Humanoid Woman. Everybody, sit down. There's a lot of plot in this movie, and Charlotte's going to do her best to get us through it.
This time, we watched KTMA Episode 11, Humanoid Woman. Listeners, partway through this movie, Joel implies this is more of a collage than a movie, and I can't say I disagree. So here's the plot, as far as I can make it out. There's a team of scientists who are out in space, and they come across a space laboratory with a bunch of floating bodies in it. They all look the same, like rubber aliens from Roswell, except for the big fetus and the one in the spacesuit, who is alive? The scientists bring her aboard and back to Earth. Grandma Scientist is worried since we don't know her purpose. She could be a threat. But they bring her back to Earth anyway, to what looks like a fancy commune for old people. A family takes the clone, Nia, in, and while there is a mom and a dad, maybe sort of, she interacts most with their robot maid, the hot son Stepan, and Grandma Midwife. They teach her to talk and run and tumble and maybe even swim, but not really. The robot declares Nia a charming child. Grandma Scientist, however, is experimenting on her the whole time. Turns out using annoying tones will control Nia because Nia has built-in auto-obedience, where if you play the right tones, she does whatever you say. Is this what cloning in the future is for? Stepan declares she would make someone the perfect wife because of her auto-obedience, and that's just gross, everyone. Nia has other powers too, like telekinesis and super speed and stuff. Superpowers come with inopportune flashbacks. While delivering a baby with Grandma Midwife and touring ruins of an ancient civilization for some reason, Nia remembers her purpose through flashback. She was created by her dad, along with a load of sibling clones to save her home planet Dessa from environmental catastrophe. So, Nia stows away on a ship bound for Dessa, which Grandma Scientist is on as well. And guess who else? Hot Stepan, who just finished his space finals and has been given a job with folks who clean up planets. What a coincidence, since Dessa needs to be cleaned up and made habitable again. Also coincidentally, they run into Nia's cloning lab on the way to Dessa. Nia finds her dead dad and forces him to relinquish the controls on the beep boop machine that controls her. And she's free, I guess. Anyway, the ship continues to Dessa. The folks there live in a desert landscape with lots of bad air and poisoned water. Yeah, they did that to themselves with factories and pollution. Apparently, the plan, Nia and the clone's purpose, was they were going to steal all the healthy kids and teach them to treat the planet differently, which the humans tell her would never have been allowed, but Nia's like invincible, so they totally could have done it. And that's why her dad was killed and the lab blown up, I think. Anyway, the humans from Earth start cleaning up the planet. The Dessans decide Earth humans are scary and actually destroying the planet, so they get mad. But the Earth humans aren't destroying the planet. There's actually an evil person named Turanchoks here who just wants power, and he's doing it to get control. Turanchoks figures out how to control Nia because there's another beep boop machine in his hideout. He brings Nia to the hideout and puts a bomb watch on her and tells her to go to the Earth spaceship so it will blow up with her. A Dessan government guy tries to stop Turanchoks and releases the stuff, a big pile of white goo Nia's dad was keeping at bay somehow. You know the stuff. Do you eat it or does it eat you? Turns out it's evil and it eats you. It eats the bad guy and all his minions. Grandma Scientist tries to remove the bomb from Nia, but she gets shot. Nia cries, and this breaks the control spell, so she removes the bomb herself. Then Nia uses her special powers to turn the evil stuff into good stuff. She pulls and pulls it and adds seeds and water, and now the planet is sort of healthy. Stepan asks Nia to leave with him, but she can't. He's sad, and the cat. Did I mention there was a cat on the ship? There was a cat on the ship. The cat decides to stay with Nia, showing that single ladies who refuse the advances of men who love them will become crazy cat ladies on any planet in the universe. The end.
Okay, meanwhile, on the satellite of love, the Mads are upset because last week's episode did well in the ratings, even though it was scheduled up against Super Bowl 23, in which the San Francisco 49ers crushed the Cincinnati Bengals 20-16. Anyway, Joel complains that last week the Mads were complaining that the ratings were too low. Whether you do well or badly, mad scientists are gonna get mad at you. Anywho, after some movie, Joel and the bots are slowly chasing each other past the desk in a sensibly paced game of tag. The really fun part is that when it's movie side, they all run down the hallway as the doors are opening up. That's kind of neat. Anyway, after some more movie, Tom sees a blender and decides he's going to hit on it. The blender doesn't seem to respond to Tom's smooth moves, but Joel, it turns out, is really able to turn her on and then drink a fresh smoothie. Well, Tom heads off and tries hitting on another appliance before realizing, ooh, it's a Mr. Coffee. Don't worry, Tom. Someday you'll find love. And then, in the next segment, Cambot has turned the camera upside down in a tribute to Salvador Dali and surrealism. But the tribute has hardly begun when it's movie sign again. Sketches are pretty short in this episode. Anyways, at the end of the movie, Joel thanks everyone who called in to talk to Joel. But he points out that they don't, in fact, have control over what movies they watch, so please stop complaining. Tom talks about what the village people are up to now. Apparently one's a cop, one's a cowboy, one's a construction worker. Anyway, that conversation all sort of peters out, but they end it with a big dating game kiss goodbye, so that's nice. What do you think, sirs?
I was surprised, Chris, because you told me so many of the sketches inside of this episode were repeated again in season 1, but I thought the sketches were, not as good as the sketches that end up happening in the future iterations of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah, all 3 of these sketches show up in later episodes, including one that we've already looked at, Robot Monster.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. They were trying to reuse material and save themselves a headache as they set up a show for national cable broadcast, I guess.
Which I totally don't mind, but these sketches just don't seem as strong as the sketches that I guess I'm used to from later episodes of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Although I did enjoy the tag set because it made me imagine a satellite of love where they had, a circular hallway where you could go around and around a central pillar of some kind. I enjoyed that. That was fun.
Yeah, I suppose that they have to be able to get behind Cambot.
Do they show Cambot at all in the KTMA episodes? I don't remember.
Just in the opening credits, like usual.
Opening credits, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I imagine Cambot as the floating ball that you see in later credits, and so being able to run around Cambot doesn't seem like it's going to be all that difficult.
Exactly. So this is the first episode of KTMA that you've seen in a good while.
Oh, yeah.
Because I did make you sit through one 30 years ago.
It's true, and someday we'll watch it together again. That is the promise of this podcast.
It's true. I finally found out what episode that was.
Oh, are you going to tell me now or will you tell me later?
I'll tell you later, I suppose. I'll surprise it for you when we do it someday. But yeah, so what did you think about the KTMA style of episode?
So I already talked about how I don't think the sketches are as strong as they will become inside of future iterations, but I have to say I was surprised by how much of what they do has already been really well created and established. Like the theme song is pretty much the same. They still have this banter going between the Mads and Joel. There's some really nice tension between them of him being, their subject in an experiment, but they don't have that sense of experiment yet. Like they're doing this in order to learn something about the human psyche. They just seem to be, torturing Joel for fun. They are mad scientists, so why not? But the bots going into although I understand from you from earlier KTMA episodes, sometimes it was just Joel, but they have both the bots inside of there. Both the bots have the fun personality. They have these sketches where they're chatting with each other. So much of what the show will become is already here. And that's amazing considering there's so much show still to come.
Yeah, no, they figure most of that out midway through the Gamras, I would say. By episode 6 or 7, it's pretty close to what the current show is. And even, the first episode, you sort of get it, even though it is just Joel in the theater, and even though things feel a little bit underbaked and he doesn't make many riffs at all. By this point in the season, it's sort of going on full cylinders. The main thing that they're not doing yet is pre-writing the riffs. So everything is still being improvised. And it shows.
But there's still quite a lot of riffing happening, which is impressive, actually, because I'm not sure that I could, off the cuff, riff a move. I mean, This is like a really amazing skill to be able to be creating jokes and off the cuff riffing the entire way through a movie. Did they watch the movies like many times beforehand to try and think of things, or are they really off the cuffing it?
I believe they're just off the cuff. I wasn't there, and it's been a while since I've read up on this, I'll admit, but my sense is that they have not yet started to pre-watch the movies.
So who's cutting the movie then? Because you said this movie was cut a lot.
Well, we'll get into that in a bit, but this is a Sandy Frank version of the movie. Sandy Frank also brought a lot of Japanese films over to us and cut the living daylights out of them and gave them new dubbings and so forth, and new titles sometimes, and that's certainly the case with this one. So it already was cut quite a bit by Sandy Frank, and then I think they had to trim it down even further to get it to fit into the
Time frame
of the show. Yeah.
I mean, the film definitely felt very choppy, but I guess I'll attribute most of that to the Sandy Frank. So, the other thing I found super, super charming was there's a phone number where you can talk to Joel. That's so cute. Oh my gosh. I was tempted to like dial it and see if some poor guy in Minneapolis like has this number and is like, stop calling Joel. He doesn't live here.
This movie is not Czechoslovakian. Let's just say that at the front for some reason. And, fair. There's no internet really at this point in time. You can't just look it up on Wikipedia. But for some reason, in some way, they get it into their heads that this is a Czechoslovakian movie. And so they make a few pretty decent jokes about, Czechs and so forth. But it's not. It's very much a Soviet movie. It came out in 1981. I'm pretty sure. Some sources say 1980. Researching this movie was a little bit tricky.
I believe it. I mean, given where the sources of information would have come from and how much would be on the internet for it, I don't know.
Yeah, shout out to Google Chrome's auto-translate feature for making a lot of this research possible, because my Russian is minimal at best. But this film is not called Humanoid Woman. That's the name that Sandy Frank and company slapped upon it. It is called, well, what is it called in English? This is a really tricky question even then, because the Russian name of the movie is, and I'm going to say this badly, Через, тернии, звёздам, which is the Russian translation of a Latin phrase, per Aspera Ad Astra, which, do you know that phrase?
Not at all.
Well, it shows up sometimes. In fact, I believe it's the state motto of Kansas.
Oh, that in no way helps me to understand what that Latin phrase means.
Well, just like in Kansas, it means through difficulties to the stars.
Through difficulties to the stars.
So we're going to reach great things through difficult struggles. Sort of what that means.
Okay.
But if you're actually making a science fiction movie, it's a tempting thing to quote.
Yeah.
So it's been translated into English both using the Latin phrase per aspera ad astra, or through some really awkward translations of it. Through the Thorns to the stars is probably the most common way that it comes about.
Ooh.
But that's a terrible title.
Yeah. Woo.
And this movie was seemingly huge in the USSR.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, a lot of people really loved this movie. It did pretty well. It got some awards both in the Soviet Union and internationally. And it really stuck in a lot of people's memories, sort of like how Star Wars stuck in a lot of people's memories, so to speak, in the West. But they didn't get to see Star Wars in the USSR.
No.
Obviously, foreign films were strictly regulated coming into it.
Would they have even seen like 2001? Because this reminded me way more of 2001 than it did of Star Wars.
That's a great question, and I don't have the answer for that. But I think that's a fair thing to say, because it's also really long and slow and episodic.
Well, and it seems to be way more trying to connect with social issues than it is trying to connect with, like a savior type storyline, right? Like it seems more along the lines of people are destroying something and we need to go back and fix it. And there are people who are struggling for power who are willing to like sacrifice a whole civilization so that they can have their own personal gain. And things like that seem way more like themes that would be inside of 2001 than you would read in a Star Wars, which seems way more poppy.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't really a special effects extravaganza for a number of reasons. And it is trying to deal with some weighty issues. But the thing that this film is most remembered for, as far as I can tell, is Nia.
As like a face? As a like visual? Or the character type?
As a face, as an actor, as a visual, as a striking presence on the screen. Although she does seem to have been very divisive. Some people think that she is astonishing to look at, and some people think that she's creepy to look at. So this is an episode that most of our listeners won't have seen. Can you describe her and tell us what you thought of her?
Yeah, she looks like 11 from Stranger Things with bigger eyes. Right? She's got the short cropped hair. She's very thin. She has very striking like facial structure with the cheekbones. And they very much like anytime she's using her powers, they tend to like overdo it on the eyeshadow. So her eyes start looking like super, super sunken. Like she's just spent too much energy. And she's very stiff all the time, like very, very like rigid structure in terms of how she holds herself and her body. And it takes a lot of work during the movie with the family that she's interacting with to make her just not move robotically. So, but yeah, she looks very much like 11 from Stranger Things, except a grown woman. So, at the age of 17 or 18, as opposed to the age of 10 or 11 or 12. I don't know. Would you say that's a fair description? She's also very pale.
Yeah, I think that's all very fair. I think the only thing that I would add to that is that her limbs are kind of long as well, in a way that a lot of people noted. She was not an actor. She was, you'll be surprised to hear,
a model?
A fashion model.
Yes.
She was absolutely a fashion model, and they were looking for somebody who had that slightly unearthly look, or slightly unheimlich look, I suppose.
Sure, maybe even a little androgynous.
Perhaps. And they saw her on the cover of a fashion magazine, and they were like, let's get her. And the one directorial acting note that she was given, basically, was, don't act.
Oh, okay.
We want you to seem inhuman. We want you to seem like you don't quite have emotions the way normal people would, so don't try to emote.
Which I would say she accomplishes that throughout the movie. She has her one emotional scene, and it's really quite dramatic when I call her grandma scientist, but the older woman who is the scientist who originally was reticent to allow Nia, like when she dies, Nia cries. And it is really quite affecting, actually, because it is the only time she shows emotion. She doesn't even emote with Stepan, the hot guy who's like hitting on her all the time.
Yeah, there's just that one scene at the very end when they've concluded everything and Stepan has to go home and he's like, come with me. And she's just like, nope. I'm going to stay here and clean up my home planet, actually. Thank you. But I'm going to take a copy of your face.
Oh, is that what she's doing? She's taking a copy of his face when she runs her hand in front of him?
Well, that's what it's been argued, because this is a film, as you may have noticed, that doesn't tell you everything that's going on.
Oh, well, yes.
It's a film that really gives you a lot of suggestions as to what might be going on and encourages you to fill in the blanks, which doesn't help when you're seeing the film all cut up to pieces. This is a 2 hour and 20-minute long film.
Which they cut to what, like an hour and 25?
Something like that. I don't know. But yeah, they cut it to pieces in order to make a more, popular for a Western market kind of film, in order to make a more saleable film, which intriguingly enough happened again to this film. In 2001, the son of the director wanted to bring it back out, wanted to restore it, but decided to make a restoration that would play well in theaters in 2001. And so cut the film again by about 20 minutes or so, mostly cutting from the first half
Did he go back to the original film to do the cutting, or did he cut from the Sandy Frank version? Do you know?
He went to the original film, he made a bunch of cuts, and he completely replaced the soundtrack and redubbed everyone's lines with new actors.
Oh my gosh.
And put in new music written by the son of the composer of the music in this, if I understand correctly.
Oh my gosh.
And it sounds just like an off version of the music that we hear in this movie.
Uh-huh.
And also sort of tweaked some of the special effects to make them more modern and less undercranked camera, which some of the effects in this film are.
Wow. So is that the version of the movie that you watched? The one that was cut up by the son?
Well, now that's a good question, because I did watch a movie that was cut up that way, but it had the original soundtrack as far as I can tell.
Oh.
So there have been further edits to this.
Okay.
But I ended up watching a somewhat restored version of the full-length original version of it that was done in 2015 or 16, but it's harder to find out full information about this, I believe. But it seems to have been uploaded to YouTube by the family, by the rights owners, by the director's family.
Okay.
So it seems reasonably legit as far as I can tell.
Okay.
Anyway, I will say, if you're going to watch this movie, watch the long version that's on YouTube, because it gives you the most context for everything. Even the cut-up version, they cut it up in part because they wanted to make it more appealing to modern audiences and have it have a normal runtime, and in part because they wanted to, quote-unquote, remove Soviet propaganda from it.
Oh. I mean, maybe it's because they called it a Czech movie the entire time. Like, it never registered as propaganda to me.
Yeah, having watched the full movie, as far as I can tell, there is no particular Soviet propaganda in this movie. They did remove some of the environmentalism stuff. Like, there's a scene in which Stepan is explained to by one of the ship's crewmen that, what they're doing on Dessa, that they're going up to clean up the planet. That scene is cut in the 2001 version. So, I don't know. None of that strikes me as Soviet propaganda, but who knows? Who knows what's going on? I can't fully explain it. It's a slow movie. It has a lot going on. Quite a lot of it is missing from this version that we're seeing. Your plot summary, while admirable, was clearly struggling. And I'm not going to say that I have a full and perfect understanding of what's going on here, but I wonder if you have any questions about the movie that I can try to explain.
Well, there was, when we were talking about the movie off pod, you were saying something about who Turanchoks is, because in the movie that we see, it doesn't seem really obvious what the motivation of Turanchoks is, other than being like secretly in charge of everything. But you made mention that he was selling things, and that was why he wanted the planet to stay crappy. Maybe you could say a little bit more about that.
Yes. So Turanchoks is the baddie of the film. Sort
of, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. I think he's meant to very much be the baddie of the film.
Well, he is once we get to the planet, but he isn't even looming in the storyline, even hinted at, until you get to the planet, which is, at least in the cut that I saw connected to MST3K, more than halfway through the movie.
Oh, yeah. The movie was originally in 2 parts, sort of like an old-timey movie.
Uh-huh.
And he only shows up well into the second part. But he is the main sort of bad guy. He's the reason why Dessa's ecology is being destroyed. And he's doing that because he's selling all the sort of breathing apparatuses for everybody. It's like in the Lorax.
Oh.
He's Aloysius O'Hare selling the air in the Lorax movie, not in the book.
Oh, okay.
So he wants this to happen. He wants the environmental destruction not to be fixed because he'll stop making all that money.
Yeah, that seems like a real, perhaps this is the Russian propaganda more than anything, right? It's the personal profiteer who is really short-sighted about the impact of what they're doing, and the impact on the entire culture and everybody else. Like, that seems far more like Russian propaganda than how we cleaned up the atmosphere by the guy in charge.
So that's entirely possible, but I also would say that removing the bit where the people profiteering upon environmental destruction is propaganda of another sort when you're talking about Russia in the 2000s.
Yes.
And it's many oil barons and so forth.
That's true.
So maybe, I don't know. I can't really speak to that. The other thing that's interesting about Turanchoks is that he's one of the most recognizable actors in this film. He's played by a guy named Vladimir Fedorov, and he was a nuclear physicist and an inventor as well as an actor.
Are you kidding? That's amazing.
Yeah. He seems like he was a really interesting guy. He was basically in a lot of Soviet films, especially when they wanted a little person. In particular, the other sort of very notable role that he was in a film called Ruslan and Lyudmila, which was one of the last of the Russian fable films directed by Alexander Ptushko. You know, the guy behind Magic Voyage of Sinbad, Sword and the Dragon, The Day the Earth Froze, all these great MST3K Christmas movies.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time before MST3K does that movie.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Many people consider that to be one of his best, and the guy who plays Turanchoks is in it. So that's super nice.
Except that, of course, we have the movie trope of having somebody who is not conventionally beautiful being the evil figure inside of the movie, which is never very pleasant to run into.
No, and I read some people suggesting that part of what we're supposed to understand is that his size is due to the ecological conditions that he is striving to maintain, which I didn't actually catch that in the movie, but maybe that is subtext that if you were part of the culture, you would have thought that immediately. I don't know.
I mean, I can totally see it because there's so much of, I mean, Mia has the line, right, of some people are wearing masks in order to breathe, but there are also people who are wearing masks in order to hide something. And it seems like there's a couple times where people take the masks off and they have disfigured faces or they have disfigured bodies. So it seems like there is that thought that the environmental impact is affecting everybody's body. So it's not super surprising to think that that might be the reason behind the perceived disfigurement of the bad person in the movie.
Exactly. Probably the most famous actor in this movie, if it's not the guy who's playing Turanchoks, is the guy who's playing Torki, Turanchoks' sort of spy guy.
With the weird hairy mole on his chin?
Well, they all have that. All the Dessa men have these strange hair things coming off of their chin.
Not all of them.
Not all of them, but all the important, powerful ones.
Yes.
So Turanchoks has it, and Rakan has it, and Torki has it. Most of the named characters from Dessa have this weird little soul patch that's sort of at the bottom of their lip, and it's completely gross.
But it's off to the side.
Yep.
Like it's not like a soul patch, which is typically, centered. It is
by one corner of your lips. It's real weird. It's a good choice. Like it's compelling in its weirdness, but it is real weird.
But it's off-putting.
It's super off-putting, as your aliens kind of maybe should be.
And it makes them more alien.
Exactly.
Which is part of also, distinguishing between Earth humans and Dessans, because they are not from the same place.
Right. Any other questions about the film?
Oh my goodness. I guess I'm really curious about the cloning. It seems like a real dangerous thing for a Soviet movie to have the creation of an invulnerable race as part of the are they the good guys, the people who are trying to save the planet? I don't know. It's very strange to be able to say that, but that seems like a really weird thing to have inside of a movie as well. So I don't know if there's more that happens in the longer cut of the movie that you would want to say about the clones.
Right. So there is something interesting with the clones, I will say.
Okay.
Which is that, I don't know if you caught this. I don't even know if it's in the Sandy Frank version, because I've watched this film several times in several different versions over the last several days.
Yes.
And it's all a blur to me. But the genetic material that was used to create Nia and the other clones up on Glan's spaceship
comes from the government guy.
Comes from Rakan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That is inside of the Sandy Frank one.
Okay, excellent.
Super briefly, because Turanchoks accuses him of protecting them because it's his genetic material.
Exactly. So there's a government guy, and he's the one who goes to the Earth to try to ask them to come back and please help us, save our planet, and yada yada yada. He's a big deal in the film.
Oh, and there's the scene in the movie where he and Nia are walking down the hallway together, and they both give each other like weird looks. Like no words are exchanged, of course, but there's like super weird looks between the two of them. And I wonder if it's because he knows that she's made from him.
Exactly, that there's some sort of weird connection between that, or that she looks somehow like she's from Dessa unlike what he would have expected of everybody else in the ship. Yeah, hard to say. And she's looking at him because she's seen him on TV, and this is how she figured out that she needed to go to Dessa, etc.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting scene, and they don't explain what's going on. They just look at each other for a couple beats, and it's, pregnant, so to speak, with implications.
Yeah, but if you don't know what those implications are, it's not super helpful. It just looks like a couple people mugging each other,
Yeah. So also, small detail about Rakan. The actor playing him, Igor Ledogorov, is the father, the actor is the father of Stepan, or the actor playing Stepan, Vadim Ledogorov.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
In 1995, the two of them, the father and son, moved to New Zealand. Because, of course, you do.
Sure.
And Vadim, the Stepan, did a lot of theater work there. And I guess maybe is still doing it. The father had trouble learning English, apparently, but did get to play in a Chekhov play before he died. So there's a lot of, I don't know if there's a huge Russian New Zealand community, but if there is, these people are central to it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it seemed pretty neat.
That's a part of New Zealand community I wouldn't have expected.
Yeah.
What about the stuff? Is there more about that stuff?
So the stuff is what is going to be used to create more people later on. And the idea behind the stuff at the end is that if you give it a living brain, it will create a new body around it so that you'll be able to get people out of their bodies that have been poisoned by the environment and into new bodies. And this will be a glorious part of the new future that Glan, the daddy of Nia, has planned. But on its own, it's just hungry and it goes after mental activity, and only Glan, or maybe also Rakan at the end, can control it.
Control it so that it creates something positive.
So that it doesn't just overwhelm the world, which is what it's threatening to do at the end until Nia is able to stop it.
Yes. Although it does look like there's more hands than just Nia trying to do the taffy pull, right? So you're right. There are more controllers.
At the very end, the rest of the crew of the Astra, of the spaceship, come down and join her in these hand gestures that support her in her controlling of it. Because although she makes a point of how she is unable to do this work without her siblings, her clone siblings, by the end of it, after she's sort of accepted Nadezhda, the grandma scientist, as you call her, accepted her after her murder as like a mother figure, she is more connected with other humans and is able to work with them, is how I would read it. But again, This film isn't telling you that. It's just showing you things and you're supposed to connect the dots.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it almost seemed like the clones were meant to dismiss people who were unable to be saved, take the children away to create a new generation, and to clean the planet slowly. It didn't seem like it was like, I'm going to be able to use this stuff to create new people. It seemed like those people are lost. We're just going to take the kids. That was how she described it when she was talking to the other people while she was standing in the lake of pollution. Like, we could have cleaned this up, and then we would have taken the healthy kids, the ones who have not been damaged, to create this new society.
I think there was a sense of this being the first plan and that there being a second plan.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, the film is not telling you everything.
Which is fair. Movies don't have to answer all of the questions they put forth.
No, and it is a shame that they cut a lot out of it. For example, you might remember that there's a cat.
Oh, yes, I adore the cat. The cat, when Nia has been on the spaceship and she's interacted with her dad, but she's there without a spacesuit on, so she's being deprived of oxygen and things. And they talk about her body having used its reserves in order to stay alive, and they rescue her and bring her back to the ship, and they've tried to repair her. And the cat brings her something, it's brought it's not a dead mouse, but it brings her something.
Brings her bubble gum.
I thought the riffers called it bubble gum. Was it really bubble gum?
It is really bubble gum.
Oh, okay. I couldn't see what it was, so.
Now the question is, where did this cat get the bubble gum?
That's a good question.
Well, we've lost that scene because there's a whole subplot that we're missing here.
There's a subplot about bubblegum?
It's partially about bubblegum. So Stepan is a young cadet. He's been brought into the Space Force, and he's on this unglamorous job. And part of his unglamorous job on this ship is to attend to the needs of a traveler on the spaceship, a guy named Prul. Although when I say guy, I mean that very loosely, because Prul is from the planet Ocean, which gets mentioned once or twice in the bits that we do see. And he is sort of an octopus guy.
Oh.
Yes.
I don't remember the octopus man.
The octopus man is almost entirely cut. You see his sort of enclosure that he's being moved around in a few times. But this subplot is almost entirely cut. He's been working with Grandpa Scientist, the one with the sort of Bermuda shorts and the scraggly beard who we occasionally see.
The one who does the sperm whale stuff?
Yes, he does underwater stuff.
Okay.
And he's been working with colleague Prul, who now has to go back home to Ocean. And Prul is very, very fussy. It's high comedy sequences. So he's incredibly fussy. He wants everything just so. And there's a cat on the ship named Vasily, and the cat keeps going after the fish man. The cat keeps going after the octopus in the tank.
Okay.
And so there's a whole bit of comedy about that, and he steals the bubble gum that Prul is carrying for the ladies? I don't understand.
I'm sorry, what?
I don't know. This feels like it's some part of Soviet culture I don't understand. But the bubble gum is for the ladies and the whiskey is for the boys.
Wow.
And the cat steals the bubble gum and takes it and gives it to Nia after she's recovering from lack of oxygen for a bit. And then at the very end of the movie, we also see the cat come back and rub up against Nia, where she's having her moment of, connection with Stepan and deciding not to go with him after all. I think the cat may stay on Dessa. It's unclear. But yeah.
It's certainly the impression that I had when I was watching the movie was that the cat chooses Nia and she wins him in the divorce.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Wow. So Sandy Frank must have been the one who cut that subplot because quite frankly, that seems like it is rife with excellent riffs to have some sort of slapstick comedy going on. Because the movie itself, that what we see is so serious.
Yeah. And apparently the director, Richard Victoroff, basically was like, you can't be too serious in a sci-fi film. Like, science fiction has some inherent silliness to it. So in the middle of this, serious, long, complicated drama about what it means to be human and what it means to have family and what it means to be a clone and about environmental catastrophe, he's still going to have goofy octopus people.
Wow. That's so... What a different movie that would have been. I mean, it wouldn't have been a different movie. It is this movie. But how that would have changed the tone of the entire thing.
Yeah. It's an interesting movie. There's so much going on in it. And it's not streamlined at all. There's no sense of okay, we need to, have a clear through line from one scene to another. It doesn't play that game at all.
It's not as choppy in the original one as it is in this cut, though, right? Because it seems really choppy in this one, clack, next scene, clack, next scene.
It does do a bit of that. It does jump from one scene to another, but it does it in a way that you can follow if you feel comfortable following movies. Mm-hmm. The movie that this reminded me of in some ways was a film called The Man Who Fell to Earth.
With David Bowie? With
David Bowie, done by Nicholas Roeg, which I've been meaning to rewatch since Bowie died and then since Nicholas Roeg died. And I finally did it for this, just to say, is it actually I remember? And it is the same way, where you all sorts of things happen that aren't fully explained. We get huge jumps in time, etc. And they aren't told to you. You just have to notice that, oh, wait, these other characters look much older while Bowie looks the same way. Or it's clearly a year later because something has happened. And it doesn't tell you. Same thing with this. It's making those kinds of, you have to be paying attention to figure out that we've moved on a bit. It's just not going to tell you directly because it assumes you're a grown-up and that you can figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's a little bit of that happening, but part of what I'm referring to is it feels abrupt, not in terms of we're shifting the story, but as in terms of I'm in the middle of a sound.
Yeah.
And the scene just changed. It feels like a bad edit.
Exactly. And that's part of what's going on both in the Sandy Frank and in the 2001 edit. Scenes get cut in half. Scenes get removed from the middle of scenes. Cutaways getting removed. There's a moment in the episode where they talk about there being a nice cut when you cut from Stepan going into the water to Stepan going into the water, but it seems like there's a few frames missing. There's a whole scene missing.
Oh, I was going to say that didn't seem weird to me because you have the weird cut of her jumping back.
Right.
And then it's like she's watching him and looking for him to come back up out of the water because she has so much anxiety about the water since she's never, seen it before. So that didn't feel as abrupt as some of the scenes where she first gets introduced to the household.
Yeah. Well, the first half of the movie gets the most aggressive editing to it.
Makes sense.
Kind of, yeah.
I don't know. We get to keep all of her touching grass, and she's never seen grass before. I mean, yay. I saw her planet. It happens later in the movie. Her planet looks crappy, and she was born on a, cloning laboratory floating in space. So, yeah, she hasn't seen grass. Doesn't seem like a surprise.
The planet is played by an area in Tajikistan, modern-day Tajikistan, part of the Soviet Union at that point. And there was a note at the end of the film originally, which gets restored in some versions of it, about how all the scenes of Dessa were filmed in the USSR.
Oh, why would you... Like, the point of Dessa is that it's awful, right?
Yeah.
That it's awful and it's polluted and nobody can live there and you can't breathe there and you have to live underground and there's lots of earthquakes and it's super dangerous. Why would you advertise that that was filmed in the country that you're releasing the movie in?
Because you're saying this is actually happening, right? This is an environmental lesson. We've actually done this to our world.
All right. That's a valid point.
It was removed because it was considered to be a little bit on the nose, which it is, but it's true.
Yeah. Yes.
Also, fun fact, apparently those earthquakes were actual earthquakes.
Oh, but they had the lines about the earthquakes already written. I assume that wasn't ad-libbed.
I think that they inserted, say these lines because we're getting earthquakes on this shot and we need to say something about it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really affect anything else in the plot. So I assume they just did it to explain the fact that we have some shots of people dealing with earthquakes. But
yeah.
I
mean, it adds to the environmental impact. This is what we live with. We got to live underground. You can't freaking breathe. We have lots of gramophones and there's earthquakes all the time.
The other things I'll say are that there were two films that I saw people say were inspired in part by this film. One of which is Blade Runner. I saw someone claim, and this was in a Russian source, I have no idea if it's true, that Ridley Scott visited Moscow to talk with the people who made this movie while he was preparing to make Blade Runner.
That makes me, I don't really want to watch Blade Runner again, but so many of the scenes are just, they're so dusty, right? Like, I think this movie talks about the dusty and the environmental impact, and trying to live and have a culture throughout environmental impact. I mean, and of course, the story that Blade Runner is about, the Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, is about like people leaving the earth because it's so horribly polluted and what's happening to the people who stay behind and having to have artificial life as your companions.
Yeah.
Because there just aren't enough people. What an interesting thing. Oh, that's so interesting.
The other film that I saw somebody claim had been inspired by it was The Fifth Element. Apparently, Luc Besson was a big fan of this film.
Oh, I would not at all be surprised.
It does make a bit of sense, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I do want to watch The Fifth Element again. I would do that.
With the understanding that Nia helped inspire Lilo, the Mila Jovovich character.
Oh.
Again, I'm not 100% sure if this is all true, but
no.
It
but
seems
what an
plausible.
Interesting thought.
Yeah. Anyway, it was a big deal movie in the Soviet Union. It still gets on the top 10 lists of Soviet sci-fi films, and it's not the easiest to watch. It's not the most pop watch. It's not the most sort of flashy watch in the world. But if you're at all interested in the idea of a toothy Soviet science fiction film that is doing a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Then I think it's worth checking it out. And you can do it by just watching it on YouTube. So there you go.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13, a montage of 13 barely connected factoids about today's experiment, Humanoid Woman. Go, Chris, go!
So yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Super Bowl 23 had the 49ers defeating the Bengals. But I know what you've been wondering all this time. Who played the halftime show? Oh, come on, you remember that year. It's when we all got to enjoy Bebop Bamboozled in 3D featuring Elvis Presto.
Elvis Presto was played by one of the dancers of the pop music show Solid Gold. He lip-synced along to a medley of 1950s songs, none of which were by Elvis Presley. This is what Super Bowl halftime shows were like, before they realized they could invite, Prince.
Anyway, we didn't watch the Super Bowl. We watched a regional puppet show. And we begin with Joel describing one of the pilots on the spaceship Pushkin.
Nice mustache.
The third section is waiting. Are you ready? I'm going now.
It's like if Hitler was the Surgeon
Don't forget the ship
General,
is damaged. You'll be
like
working in
that.
zero gravity.
I'm pretty sure you know who Hitler was and what his mustache looked like. The U.S. Surgeon General when this episode was released was C. Everett Koop, a Reagan appointee with a legendary mustacheless beard.
Koop was one of the few surgeons general to become a household name, in part because he put himself forward to educate the general population about hot-button issues such as HIV/AIDS and the importance of sex ed for children, but also because of his easily recognizable facial hair.
The opening credits in the Sandy Frank version feature a screenwriting credit to Richard Victor and Keir Brown, which is fun. Richard Victor is actually Richard Viktoroff, which is pretty close, and Keir Brown is noted Soviet science fiction writer Kir Bulyachov, whose last name does not mean brown. Well, many of the other Russian names are similarly adapted.
The robot butler, Hazel, gets described like this.
She kind of looks like
If she'll like my cookie.
Like Rosie from the Jetsons.
she looks like a Hopi Kachina doll.
Rosie was, of course, the robot butler from the Jetsons. Kachina figurines are given to Hopi children for them to take care of. They are carved to represent certain spirits. The Hopi also make non-religious versions for the tourist and collectors markets.
Now, how did Joel know about Hopi Kachina figurines? Well, who knows, but there's a 1957 Gumby short all about them, which sounds like something Joel would have watched as a kid. We'll link to it in the show notes, but surprise, surprise, the animated short about Hopi culture from 1957's has some charms, but includes a lot of racist tropes, so we'll add some more informative links as well.
At one point, Nia's wearing a wig, and Joel says,
Oh, she looks like Sandy Duncan.
Sandy Duncan is probably best known for playing the lead role in a 1979 Broadway production of Peter Pan, or for being the replacement for Valerie Harper in the sitcom Valerie, or rather the Hogan Family. But she also starred with Roddy McDowall in the 1978 Disney film The Cat from Outer Space. The film also has roles for McLean Stevenson and the guy who replaced McLean Stevenson on MASH, Harry Morgan.
When Nia hears the buzzing that puts her under other people's control, we get this exchange.
Stop it.
He's playing a goose harp.
Hello.
A what?
The quote-unquote Jews harp is nowadays usually called a jaw harp or a mouth harp for obvious reasons. It's a metal contraption you put in your mouth, and it sounds a little something like this.
Tom responds the way he does because Josh Weinstein was raised Jewish, which comes up again later in the riffing.
Oh, yeah.
Avenu Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem is a common Hebrew phrase meaning peace be upon you. Havenu Shalom Aleichem, we brought peace upon you, is a popular folk song that repeats that lyric many, many times. It has, let's say, significantly more melody than Tom is singing here.
As Nia is recovering, she gets a few visitors, which Crow describes as...
Dirk,
Look, there's a man,
Stig,
and another man,
Nasty,
and another man.
and Barry.
Dirk McQuickley, Ron Nasty, Stig O'Hara, and Barry Walm are collectively better known as the Ruddles, the fictional pop group created by Monty Python's Eric Idle and Neil Innes as a parody of the Beatles. The Spinal Tap-esque documentary about them, All You Need Is Cash, is fun if you're a fan of Python and the Beatles, and I still have a soft spot for their song Cheese and Onions.
As the pilots flip through a database of spaceships, Tom says,
They're playing Husker Du in space.
We mentioned Husker Du a few episodes ago, but here it is again. Yes, Husker Du, the memory game for kids, makes another appearance. Did you know they're still making Husker Du? Relive an MST3K childhood with your own copy of Husker Du today.
And finally, as some character or other goes by, Joel says,
Is that Paul Williams? Singer-songwriter?
Paul Williams was a singer-songwriter in the 70s who wrote or co-wrote many hits, including The Carpenters' We've Only Just Begun. But more importantly, he wrote the lyrics to the theme to The Love Boat. But even more importantly, he co-wrote Kermit the Frog's smash hit Rainbow Connection. Legend. And also that guy in the movie looks nothing like Paul Williams.
And that's time.
In real life, we are at the 2-hour mark in recording, and that means we have said quite a lot, not all of which is going to make it into the episode, but I think we'll have to find room to squeeze in one last little detail. Charlotte, is there something else about this episode that you want to talk about?
There is, and I'll do it very quickly. I wanted to talk about the new zoo review. Because there are a couple of points in time in the episode where they reference this children's show from the 70s that I had no idea existed.
Oh.
The new zoo review is before my time, but I guess it's not in front of Josh's time. Like, he would have been a kid watching this, right?
Well, I grew up watching it.
You did?
Yeah. It was on in reruns, but I definitely watched the New Zoo Review as a kid. Even though, yes, it had stopped filming by the time I was 2.
I mean, I watched a couple of episodes, and I'm like, it's super familiar. Because what is it? It's 2 people, and then it's 3 people in a character costume, and they sing and they dance and they talk about why we work and why we clean up after ourselves and why we go to school and how fun it is to learn. And they sing songs, and they all live on this brightly colored set. And, you know, I mean, it feels very familiar to a lot of the children's shows that I watched, you know, and some of it feels very Sesame Street in some ways.
So I decided to rewatch one because I knew we were going to talk about it, and it had been a while since I'd seen the New Zoo Review. And I watched the episode about school because it's one of the first full episodes that came up when I searched on YouTube. And it sounds like you also watched that one.
And did you love the song about how going to school is dumb and no one wants to do it and we want to go to the beach instead?
I mean, I liked the sentiment, but I actually thought all the music was kind of terrible.
In the way that some, like, kids shows music is terrible. I'm thinking of, like, Barney. Barney has the things that have gone out of copyright, and they can sing it as much as they want to, and it's very sing-songy. It's a very specific thing.
Yeah. The thing that impressed me most about this episode was, okay, so Freddy Frog got a really bad report card and doesn't want to show it to anybody and doesn't want to go to school and decides he doesn't need to be at school because the circus is coming to town and he's going to be the new ringmaster. He's going to run away with the circus. It's going to be great. And then they talk and they convince him that school's actually fun because you get to learn about all sorts of things, including, this was fun, how else would you know that there exists such a thing as snow? They actually say that this is their first argument of things you learn in school and nowhere else is that snow exists. And I thought, this is a bad argument.
Well, I mean, but given their set, they don't have any snow on set.
No, I assume this was filmed in California and there's less snow than usual in the LA area. But, it just was really bad. And the other thing is that he talks at one point, he has this really sad song about why he's having so much difficulty at school. And he mentions in passing that he sits in a place where the chalkboard is blurry.
So this isn't really a show about school. It's about good eyesight. And
except they never address that again. It turns out that the reason he's having such a hard time in school is that he needs glasses, but they never notice that. And they convince him to go back. It's like, can you just address this poor frog's problem instead of telling him that there's no other way he'll learn about snow and insisting he must learn what the capital of Ohio is? It was so frustrating. It was so pedagogically frustrating.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you also learned you needed glasses at school, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, or you can reach us on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. For as little as $1 an episode, you too can be like Jeff and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our super fan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/130.
Oh, there's going to be a lot of links in our show notes that are in Russian. I'll tell you that much right now.
Everyone will have the experience that you have with Google Translate.
Indeed.
Do we get to leave KTMA for our next episode, or are we going to remain Kitma?
We are going to leave KTMA, and we're going to head back into the sci-fi era to see if Humanoid Woman wants to meet up with Season 9, Episode 1, The Projected Man. But until then, we will see you soon in Portland, Oregon for our live show on April 22nd. Details in the show notes.
But until then, that turtle should be showing up at any minute now.
Goodbye, and may God like you. Take it away, Theme Squad. Maybe. I don't know.